Here to discuss the banks and the downgrades and Moody's is Assistant Editorial Page Editor James Freeman. James, welcome.
Thanks, Mary. Good to be here.
So let's put up a quick list of the banks here that were downgraded. Some of the biggest names in America's financial system. I don't think we've got it yet, but we'll get it in a minute.
Well, let's see. I'll just try and name
There we
them,
go. There we go.
Okay,
We got
so
them.
you got Citi, Bank of America, Citi, Goldman, J.P. Morgan Chase, Morgan Stanley. So these are basically all of the super big banks that also have really big Wall Street operations, trading, securities underwriting, that
James,
kind of
why
thing.
the downgrade now?
Well, as a taxpayer, you might have wanted to say, hey, this is great. If they're saying that maybe these banks are less likely to pay their bills, maybe that means there would be no government bailout. But that's not the case. The Moody's said they still all get government protection. There are a couple things going on here. Basically, we have a terrible economy. Banks are affected by that, just like everybody else. What they're looking at here, and you question when you say all the big banks, why isn't Wells Fargo in that list? It's because they're basically a relatively simple traditional bank. These are all the banks that have a big Wall Street presence, and so what Moody's is looking at is the exposure to risky trading, underwriting, businesses that have a lot of volatility, have some risk. And looking at these companies, they're saying this risk, I think what's really sort of between the lines here is this risk is not being offset by real earnings power.
Okay, James, everybody knows, though, that we've had an anemic economic growth now for several quarters, and it looks like going ahead for a couple quarters, too, at least. But you said one thing that was interesting, too big to fail, systemic risk. I thought our regulators in Washington were making these banks safer. What happened?
Yeah, well, you wonder what's going on here, because one interesting thing in here is that they're saying the parent companies are maybe slightly more likely to default, but not their subsidiaries. And this kind of tracks with what the FDIC is doing, where they're the ones who are supposed to wind up a big bank when it's failing, and they've kind of made it pretty clear that the subsidiaries, that's where you want to lend money, you'll get paid back less likely than at the holding company level.
James, is this just the first of many downgrades to come, or is it true that U.S. banks are actually to a large extent in much better financial shape than their European counterparts
This is kind of a puzzle. I mean, is it going to be, are we going to see more downgrades? Who knows? I mean, these credit rating agencies, remember, they were phenomenally wrong, consistently wrong about mortgage-backed securities leading up to the crisis. So, don't take what they say as gospel truth, but it's just kind of a puzzle what they're looking at here, because these banks are healthier in terms of higher amounts of capital, more liquidity. They seem to be in better shape by most traditional measures. So I think you have to look at an economy that's not very good, and I have to say, thanks to Dodd-Frank, a lot of limits on their ability to make money. There are a lot of businesses, not just in terms of the risky trading that lawmakers want to get rid of, but also we've seen credit cards and debit cards be really limited in what they can charge and how they can do business. And I think that's starting to have an impact on the banks.
Well, James, that's a really great point. We've only got about 30 seconds left, but let's just do a quick list of those businesses. So credit cards, debit cards, limited now in the fees they can charge.
Right.
Restrictions on mortgages, new capital rules. They nationalized the student loan business. So what's left here for these guys?
Yeah, well, really, it's unlimited what where the limits could be. As you've covered this new Consumer Bureau, which basically can now regulate anything it thinks is abusive in the lending area, which that covers a lot of stuff, since they get to define what abusive or unfair is. So.